Shabbat Shalom. I got the order wrong. I meant to say, Shabbat Shalom, then Chodesh Tov, then Chag Urim Sameach. So short and sweet today, friends. In the myriad of things that happened in the world while I was in Israel, one that hits the hardest and closest to home was the passing away of Professor Eliezer Diamond, a longtime teacher at the seminary, my master's advisor, the High Holiday Chazan of my home shul in Madison, Wisconsin for some 20 years, where he stayed with my mom because we're the closest kosher house to the shul, and an inspiration. He was also supposed to be a scholar in residence here at the synagogue in a few weeks, and so I think we're talking about maybe having some of his students who are here that weekend instead teach in his honor. So we'll hear more about Rabbi Diamond, just an incredible man, scholar, and in the weeks to come. But I wanted to share a teaching of his on this parsha in his honor, which also was something that I thought a lot about in our Israel trip. So he notes that when we're reading through the parsha this week, that we get to the scene at the end where the brothers are they're about to be released, but Shimon is still, sorry, let me set the stage. Joseph, we know Joseph. Joseph is in charge of things in Egypt. The brothers come because they need food. Joseph is playing a little trick on them because he wants to get Benjamin to come down. So he says, you have to go get Benjamin, leave Shimon as a hostage. The brothers are thinking about, what led them to this place. And there's this line where they say to one another, alas, we are being punished on account of our brother because we looked upon his anguish yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That is why his distress has come upon us. And this line is meant to, and Rabbi Diamond points this out, and I did not notice it, right? It should hit you like a ton of bricks, because it says that the reason the brothers are being punished is that when they sold their brother Joseph into slavery, he was crying out to them, and they paid him no heed. Which, if we were to go back to chapter 37, the scene where the brothers sell Joseph, do we hear Joseph's cries? Are they depicted in the Torah? No, they are not. And to make it even worse, what do the brothers do? What do we hear in 37 the brothers do? They put Joseph in the pit, and then nice job, everybody. And then they eat. They have lunch. Now looking back on it, we see they have lunch while Joseph, their brother, is screaming at them, right? Is crying out, and they do nothing. And so Rabbi Diamond uses this teaching to talk about the screams that we might miss in our world, right? The cries that are being cried that we don't hear. And he wrote this maybe about 10 years ago when, we already had phones in our pockets and news, but it wasn't quite this much. And we live in a world where, for some of us, it's impossible not to hear the screams and the cries, because every single time I turn on a device, I hear about some horrible thing that has happened in the world. And yet, there are still things that we miss. I remember having a conversation with someone on the bus in Israel, and they were asking me a question about some military operation that Israel had done. And, they were like, Rabbi, do you remember, was it the 42nd Battalion or was it this, right? They were that level of granular knowledge of Tzahal and what it was doing, which is interesting and it's commendable. And then that same person, they weren't a member of our shul, it was one of the people from the other shul. Don't worry, all the people looking around here. But that same person, then, when we were hearing someone talking about the government of Israel recently took English and Arabic off the list of official languages, right? It's only Hebrew and not the other ones. And that same person said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that Arabic and English were ever official languages of Israel." Right? To show that we can be so hyper-focused on one thing. Right? We can know everything about something, and we can completely miss something else going on over here. And I hear in Rabbi Diamond what he says, a call for us to think about the things that we're missing. And think about the things that we don't hear, because the things that make the news are the things that the news or the algorithms that control the news want us to hear about. But there is a lot going on. And one of the amazing parts of going on this Israel trip is that you get to hear them and see them firsthand. And so we met not only with people who are worried and people who are fighting and people who are scared and people who are doing, but we met with people doing wild and wacky and amazing things. A group of hippies and psychologists who created a farm for people with PTSD so that they can work the farm and try to heal themselves through the labor of working with these bees. And they talked about why they specifically use bees, because bees are a little bit dangerous, and if you are a soldier suffering, you might need a little adrenaline just to kind of get through the day, and so apparently bees are the way to go. Some of us are allergic. I had to wait on the other side of the field. But the amount of care and thought that goes into how they could help other people. And what they wanted to talk to us about was not only all of the thought that went into what they were doing, but half the farm they haven't built yet and what they're going to do, because unfortunately, the need for work with people with post-traumatic stress syndrome in Israel is going up exponentially. And we met with a man who is trying to just build his kibbutz in the north, Kibbutz Daphna, and in addition to running a kibbutz and seemingly being a part of the gardening team, he's also works for military intelligence in the north, and he also ran Operation Good Neighbor, which was the Israeli armies trying to send people up into Syria to help kids who need medical attention and bring them down so that they could safely get the care that they needed. Right? And his book is in the lobby, by the way. He gave me a copy. And to hear his story of trying to balance what it means to be secure and what it means to be safe and what it means to be a good person and a good neighbor, and how he can build both his own community as well as the community of the North was phenomenal. And we met with a rabbi who might be the Messiah and he might be a lunatic. It's unclear. But he was a special education teacher. He was a truck driver. He ran a nonprofit that fed, does someone remember? I didn't write it down. Thousands, right? The tens of thousands of people in Netivot, right? He claims to have founded it when he was 15. I didn't check up on that, right? But what? He's 43 and single. He wanted to make sure we knew that. Again, might be a lunatic, might be the Messiah, right? But this man, the frenetic energy coming off of this man, right? And with nothing but the desire to help and care for the people around him was incredible, right? And what he's able to do in a day, like we couldn't do in a month. It was just amazing to hear him. And not only that, the people that we met on the trip, we met a woman who is not a digital native, let's say, based on her age, but has dedicated her professional life to trying to use TikTok and YouTube and technology to do Hasbara for Israel and to help Israel and things like that. And it was also incredible to watch her. But not only that, the people on our trip who we met who were there. Right? I already mentioned our tour guide, Hillary Menkowitz, who grew up around the corner from us here and who was here until she was 30 and had thought about making Aliyah and wasn't going to make Aliyah, and then did a Federation leadership trip, and she told us the story that she hit the ground and thought, well, I'm never leaving. And so she stayed and has dedicated her life to bringing other people to Israel and teaching them about it and guiding people. And she was incredible, and it was wonderful. And we got to share the last Shabbat of a member of this synagogue, a child of this synagogue, who's about to go into the army, who has the, what? Right, yes, when we were there, it was his last Shabbat before going in. Excuse me. May or may not be related to Jody Gordon. It might be Ilan. You're okay. Right? And this is a man who has the world at his feet and decided that what he wants to do with those feet is plant them in Israel in its defense. And he's on Kibbutz Hanaton, the conservative movement kibbutz in the north, and dedicating the next 3 years of his life to the defense of our people. And we were honored to get to share some time with him and to be with him. And we hope that he is happy and safe and does well. The stories that we miss when we just focus on the big things are myriad. I left out dozens of them. We met with Shani Goldsmith, who I thought she was maybe 14 years old, but then she told us about her child, and so I'm not sure. But she has given her son, who's 5 years old, to the Yad B'Yad school. Her education is in this school that teaches by goal and by ideology Arabs and Jews and Christians and Druze all together in one school. And she has dedicated her professional life to Beit Geffen, which is a community center in a neighborhood of Haifa that used to be a Jewish neighborhood and is now a Muslim neighborhood. But the community center brings everybody together, and they put on shows and they do cafes and they do art. And this is what she's doing with her life, trying to promote this vision of what a productive shared society can be. And it's incredible. The people around her think she's dumb. The people around her think it's not going to work. And the other people around her are here for it. And her voice is one that we should all know about. So when we think about Israel, when we think about our world, there are big stories, and they're important, and then there are the small ones. And there are the small stories within the big. I heard earlier this week of a friend of my wife's who was actually at our wedding, an old friend who was also playing with his children on Bondi Beach on Sunday morning. And he was on the next to the Chabad. Oh, they're okay, thank heaven, they're all fine. But he wrote to Aaron about what it meant to cover his child when this happened. But what struck me is he also wrote that he was so glad to be there because it would have been so much worse, he said, to have been in America hearing about what happened than to be there and to be able to know that his family and everyone was okay. These stories are everywhere. And we can't listen to all of them, but we also can't ignore them. There are screams happening all around us, and we can't miss them. But we have to somehow live our lives. And this is, I don't have an answer, I'll just tell you right now, but this is the problem of our day. This is the cognitive dissonance in which we live, and it's the reason why everybody fights on airplanes, which, by the way, I'll tell you about Kiddush. There was a fight on our airplane as we landed. And ask Frances, but Frances might need to go to the farm for PTSD she was there. So ask us later. But this is the cognitive dissonance in which we live. We live, please God, wonderful lives, full of light and life and health and great things. And we know that there's horrible things out there. And we know that there might be horrible things ahead. And we have to find a way to go through. So we have a few answers in what we can do here. Right? One of them is that we can't ignore it. And there's a teaching of the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandfather of the Baal HaTanya, Hasidic Rebbe, who said that he and his grandson were learning in a house one night. And a baby in the house was crying. It was the Baal HaTanya's child was crying, and his father was studying, and he was wrapped in study, and so he was just studying and studying and studying and studying. And his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, at one point put the book down, And he went into the room, into the crib, and he picked up the baby, and he soothed the baby, and he got the baby back to sleep, and he put him down. And as he left, he walked to his grandson's room, and he said, if you're studying Torah in such a way that you miss the cries of a child, you're doing it wrong. And so one of the things that we have to do is live our lives so that we can still hear the cries around us, right? So that we can let them in and know that they're there. And it can't be all the time. And another Hasidic Rebbe teaching on the Shema asked the question of why does it say that you have to put the words of God al levavecha, on your heart, and not bilvavecha, right, in your heart. And the Kotzker Rebbe says that it's because our hearts can't be open all the time. We just can't live that way. If our hearts were open all the time, we couldn't function anymore. And so the best that we can do is put these words on our heart so that in the moments when it does open, those are the first things that come in. And so we have to read these stories. And sometimes we have to dig a little deeper beyond the first, front page of whatever newspaper you read or first minute of scrolling. Don't scroll for more than a minute. Find other ways to get news. But whatever it is, we have to search out stories. And even if we can't encompass all that they mean in that moment, we have to know about them so that when our hearts and minds are open, we hear about stories like people like Shani, like this rabbi in Netivot, like Elon Gordon. We know that they're there and that we can encompass them when we're ready in our own time. And then sometimes we have to treat it like the Hanukkah candles. Because the Hanukkah candles are beautiful, each single one in and of themselves. Every light, every flame, every candle, you could spend hours just watching it burn, each one. And sometimes we do. And sometimes you take a step back and you look at the whole mantle and you see all of the light and all of the light coming together and you can appreciate the beauty bigadol. And so in our world of a million news stories all at once, of all of these screams trying to reach us where we know we can't miss one of them, sometimes it's our job to think of one and really hear it. And hear that person and understand who they are and what they want and where they've been and where they're going, and spend the time that it takes to really try to understand someone and something else. And then other times we take a step back and we appreciate the beauty of the whole picture. And we try to get a sense of big trends and enjoy that as well. May we have a week of rest, but also a week of hearing and understanding and listening to the screams around us. May we not miss them and bring them in when we can. Shabbat Shalom.